At his own wedding, my son-in-law slapped me, but it was his demand for my house that truly revealed the monster he was. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. 20 minutes after that slap, 2 women arrived, and my son-in-law began to weep. He had been thoroughly exposed. The front door flew open and slammed against the wall, with a resounding crack that nearly sent my porcelain coffee mug tumbling from my hands. My daughter, Claire, burst into the kitchen like a summer squall, her face glowing with an almost frantic excitement, her entire body seeming to hum with nervous energy. "Mom, you are not going to believe what just happened." She was already pacing the linoleum floor before I could even find a safe spot for my mug on the counter. Her hand dove into her jacket pocket, retrieving something small and dark. "I did it. Mom, I actually did it." A cold knot formed in my stomach the moment I saw the velvet box. It was a deep, midnight blue. The kind that looked expensive and heavy, with the weight of promises, futures, and decisions that could alter the course of a life. "Claire, honey, slow down a minute." I reached for a dish towel, my hands suddenly needing a task. "What exactly did you do?" "I proposed!" She snapped the box open, and the diamond inside caught the morning kitchen light, shattering it into 1,000 tiny captured stars. "Martin said yes, Mom. We're engaged." The words struck me with the force of ice water. 3 months. She had known this man for precisely 3 months, and now she was talking about marriage with the same casualness as if she were buying a new sofa. "Claire, that's..." I struggled to keep my voice even and calm. "That's wonderful news, sweetie. Really wonderful." But my mind was already racing, picturing Martin Hayes, the handsome mixologist from that trendy bar downtown, the man who looked at my house not with the polite interest of a guest, but with the appraising eye of a developer calculating square footage, the man who would answer his phone in the middle of our family dinners and who always spoke to me with a thinly veiled condescension, as if I were some doddering old woman. "Look at this ring." Claire thrust the box towards me. Her smile stretched so wide it looked like it must have been painful. 2 carats. Platinum setting. It cost me my entire savings. But he deserves the best. Her entire savings. Every last penny she had painstakingly scraped together from her demanding programming job, all of it gone in a single, breathtakingly impulsive gesture. I took the box and examined the ring. The diamond seemed almost unnaturally perfect, its brilliance too sharp, just like everything else about Martin. "It's beautiful, Claire. When did you propose?" "Tonight, at Jeppy's. You know, that little Italian place on the north side where we had our second date." She was practically bouncing on the balls of her feet. "A child on Christmas morning. I had the whole thing planned." I got down on one knee, right there, in front of everybody. He cried, Mom. He actually cried tears of joy. Asterisk. I'll bet he did asterisk. I thought grimly. Asterisk. Tears of pure, unadulterated financial relief. More likely. Asterisk. Claire. Can we sit down for a minute? I gestured toward the small kitchen table. This is big news. Life-changing news. I know, right? She finally stopped her pacing and plopped down into her usual chair, the one she'd used since she was a little girl. I can't believe I'm actually going to be married. Claire Duncan Hayes has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It does, I conceded, sitting across from her and choosing my next words with the care of someone disarming a bomb. But honey, you've only known each other for 3 months. Are you absolutely sure you know him well enough for such a massive step? The radiant light in her eyes flickered and dimmed. What's that supposed to mean? I just mean that marriage is a serious commitment. It's about more than just love. I leaned forward, keeping my voice gentle, almost pleading. It's about compatibility, shared values, long-term goals. Have you two talked about things like children, Money. Where you want to live in 5 or 10 years? Of course we have, she said, her tone growing defensive. We want all the same things, Mom. A family, happiness, a good life together. And money? Have you discussed finances? I had to ask. Claire's jaw tightened. Why are you suddenly so focused on money? Asterisk. Because your fiancé sized up my house like a real estate appraiser. Asterisk. I wanted to scream. Asterisk. Because he asked intrusive questions about my retirement savings within an hour of meeting me. Because every instinct I have is screaming that he's a gold digger. Asterisk. And I'm just saying, sweetie, that financial compatibility is important. You're a successful programmer. He's a bartender. Those are very different worlds, with very different incomes. So what? Claire's voice was rising now, sharp with indignation. Are you saying he's beneath me because of his job? No, that's not what I'm saying at all, I insisted, holding up my hands as if to ward off the storm I could see gathering on her face. I am just saying that you need to be sure you're on the same page about expectations. We are times on the same page. She stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. He loves me, Mom, and I love him. That's what matters. But I couldn't let it go. Not when I could see the disaster approaching with the unstoppable momentum of a freight train. Claire, he seems presumptuous to me. Disrespectful, even. Have you ever noticed the way he talks to me when he thinks you're not listening? Don't you dare. Her voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare talk about him like that. You barely know him. But I see how he treats me. How he speaks to me in my own home. The words were tumbling out now, fueled by months of watching this man expertly manipulate my daughter. He looks at everything in this house like he's already moved in, like he's mentally calculating what it's all worth. Claire's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. Stop it. Just stop it, right now. Honey, I've been around long enough to recognize enough. She slammed her palm flat against the table, making the salt shaker jump. I'm a grown woman. Stop interfering in my life. Claire, please. I'm just trying to. No. She was backing away toward the door, her face a mask of anger and hurt. I'm done listening to your judgments. You want to know what I think? I think you're jealous that I found someone who makes me happy. That's not true. And you know it. Is it? Because ever since Dad died, you've been alone. And now you can't stand the thought of me having what you lost. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Claire's expression immediately crumpled, as if she couldn't believe what had just come out of her own mouth. Mom. Claire, wait. But she was already at the front door, yanking it open. I'm done with this conversation. Martin and I are getting married, whether you approve or not. The door slammed shut with a finality that rattled the windows in their frames. I stood there in the ringing silence, listening as her car engine roared to life in the driveway. Gravel crunched as she backed out far too fast, tires squealing as she sped away down the quiet street. The kitchen, once filled with her vibrant energy, now felt impossibly vast and quiet, the only sounds being the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick-tock of the wall clock. I looked down and was surprised to see that my hands were shaking. I stood there, staring at the closed door for what felt like an eternity, after Claire's taillights vanished into the night. The silence in the house was a physical presence, pressing in on my eardrums like deep water. Finally, with mechanical, robotic movements, I forced myself to move, gathering our coffee mugs from the counter. Her mug was still warm to the touch. I held it for a moment longer than necessary, a wave of memory washing over me. Claire, as a 10-year-old, drinking hot chocolate from this very same cup, tiny marshmallows melting into sweet, milky spirals on the surface. The living room felt cavernous as I settled into my worn leather armchair. It was the same chair where I had held her during terrifying thunderstorms, where we'd watched countless Cubs games on lazy Sunday afternoons, and where I'd tried to explain the facts of life with all the awkward sincerity a widowed mother could muster. And now, with a few careless words, I had probably ruined everything between us. Maybe I really had overstepped. Her accusation echoed in my head. Asterisk. You're jealous. Asterisk. Claire was 28 years old, a smart, educated woman, fully capable of making her own decisions. What right did I have to question her choices so harshly? But then I pictured Martin's eyes, those cool, calculating eyes, sweeping across my living room as if he were already rearranging the furniture to his liking. I remembered the way he had asked about my retirement plans during only their second visit. His voice as smooth as honey, but his interest as sharp as a razor. I reached for the old photo album on the side table, my fingers tracing the familiar, worn edges of the leather cover. My late husband, David, smiled up at me from the first page, his arm wrapped proudly around a teenage Claire at her high school graduation. He'd been gone for 5 years now, but sometimes I still caught myself setting 2 places at the dinner table out of habit. "What would you do, David?" I whispered to his smiling photograph. "What would you tell me to do?" But I already knew the answer. David had always been the wise one, the diplomat in our family. He would have found a way to voice his concerns without triggering a full-blown explosion. He would have invited Martin out for a beer, drawn him out with gentle, probing questions, and made his own quiet judgment without ever alienating our daughter. I turned the page and was met by my own much younger face, staring back at me, 25 years old, standing next to my first husband, Richard. God, I had been so certain back then, so utterly convinced that his charming smile was a sign of true love, that his keen interest in my budding engineering career was genuine affection. That marriage lasted a whole 18 months, just long enough for him to realize that junior engineers didn't make nearly as much money as he'd hoped. Just long enough for him to find someone with better financial prospects, and just long enough to teach me the painful lesson that some people view marriage not as a partnership, but as a business transaction. I had sworn to myself I would never be that naive again. And yet, here was my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful Claire, making the exact same mistake, with the exact same type of man. The parallels were chilling. Richard had been charming and vivacious, always ready with a quick laugh and a flattering compliment. He'd made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the world, right up until the moment he didn't. Martin possessed that same practiced, polished charm, the way he would lightly touch Claire's arm when he laughed at her jokes, the way he would gaze at her, as if she'd personally hung the moon and stars in the sky just for him. But I had seen his expression when he thought no one was looking. A look of cold calculation, of a man constantly measuring everything and everyone against some internal profit margin. I closed the album and rubbed my tired eyes. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe I was just a lonely old woman, jealous and afraid of losing the only family I had left. Maybe years of grief had made me paranoid, deeply suspicious of anyone who threatened to change the small, comfortable world the two of us had built. But deep down, I didn't think so. This wasn't about my loneliness or my fear of abandonment. This was about protecting my daughter from a man who saw dollar signs where she saw a future filled with love. The question was, how could I make her see it without pushing her even further away? I made my way back to the kitchen and put the kettle on for tea. The familiar ritual was soothing, selecting the cup, measuring the loose leaves, waiting for the water to reach a rolling boil. By the time I sat back down at the table with the steaming mug, I had made my decision. Tomorrow, I would call Claire. I would apologize for my timing, for my clumsy delivery, for making her feel attacked during what should have been a moment of pure celebration. I would invite them both over for a proper dinner, creating an opportunity to observe Martin more closely, but this time without seeming confrontational. And if I was wrong about him, if he truly loved my daughter for who she was, rather than for what he thought she could provide, I would be the very first to welcome him into our family with open arms. But if I was right, I sipped my tea and began planning exactly what I would say. Claire needed to hear humility from me, not judgment. She needed to feel respected, not criticized. And Martin needed to feel just welcome enough to let his guard down and reveal his true nature. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11 times. It was late enough that Claire would be home by now, probably recounting our fight to Martin, probably painting me as the overbearing, interfering old mother who couldn't accept her happiness. Let him think that. For now, it was better that he underestimate me. I finished my tea and headed upstairs, already composing the heartfelt apology I would deliver in the morning. The right words, delivered at the right time, could heal the rift between my daughter and me. And once Claire and I were solid again, I could focus all my energy on protecting her from the man who was counting her money before he'd even said, "I do." I woke at dawn, my body stirring before the alarm clock had a chance, my mind immediately locking onto the delicate task ahead. Coffee first, then the call. I needed the caffeine to steady my nerves, and the clarity to choose my words with precision. Standing at the kitchen counter, I rehearsed my apology out loud, feeling like an actor preparing for the most crucial performance of his life. "Claire, I want to apologize." Too formal. "Honey, I'm so sorry about last night." Too simple. Too dismissive of the hurt I'd caused. I was wrong to interfere. Too much of an admission. I pulled out a notepad and started jotting down key points. Asterisk. Respect her decision. Support her happiness. Request a second chance. Keep it brief. Asterisk. 8 o'clock felt too early, too eager. 8:15 seemed pushy. By 8:30, I was pacing anxious circles around the kitchen table, checking my watch every 30 seconds. Finally, I couldn't wait any longer and grabbed the phone. First ring. Second ring. Third. "Hello?" Claire's voice was flat, professional, and chillingly distant. "Claire, it's Mom. I was hoping we could talk." A heavy silence stretched between us, feeling as wide and deep as a chasm. Then, "I really don't have time for another lecture about my life choices, Mom." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a full minute, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, before dialing again. "Claire, please, don't hang up." Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. On the third attempt, she answered with pure, undiluted exasperation. "What do you want? More insults for Martin? More reasons why I'm making a huge mistake?" "Claire, I want to apologize." The words rushed out in a single breath before she could disconnect again. "I shouldn't have interfered in your personal life. You're a grown woman, and you have every right to make your own choices. I was completely out of line." The silence that followed this time felt different. It was surprised, not hostile. "You're apologizing?" "Yes. Absolutely. What I said last night was unfair and deeply hurtful. And I am so sorry." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "You came to me to share wonderful news, and I turned it into a bitter argument. That was wrong of me." "Well," her voice lost some of its hard edge, "I wasn't expecting that. I love you, Claire. Your happiness matters more to me than anything else in this world. If Martin makes you happy, then I want to support that relationship." I could hear her breathing on the other end, processing my words. In the background, I heard a muffled voice. Martin asked something I couldn't quite make out. "Okay," she said finally. "Maybe we can actually talk like adults then." "I'd like that very much," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. I took a deep breath. In fact, I was hoping you'd both come for dinner tomorrow night. I'd really like the chance to get to know Martin better. To start over on the right foot. Hold on. The phone was muffled as she covered it with her hand. I could catch only disjointed fragments of their conversation. Dinner at my mom's. Wants to apologize. Second chance. When she came back on the line, her voice was cautious but tinged with optimism. He says yes. Tomorrow at 6? Perfect. I'll make your favorite pot roast with those honey-glazed carrots you used to steal from the pan before they were done. For the first time since she had burst through my door the night before, Claire laughed. A real, genuine laugh. I haven't had your pot roast in months. Martin's excited to try it. Wonderful. And Claire, thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. Yeah, well, you're my mom. We figure things out. After we hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of the kitchen, relief washing over me like warm water. Phase 1 was complete. The relationship was salvaged. The dinner invitation accepted. Now came the real challenge. Hosting Martin Hayes in my home. Observing him closely enough to confirm my deepest suspicions, without appearing to be doing exactly that. I opened my notepad to a fresh page and began to plan the menu. Pot roast, obviously. My late husband David's recipe for honey-glazed carrots. The good china, which was stored in the dining room cabinet. Wine. Something pleasant that would encourage conversation and perhaps lower Martin's carefully constructed guard. Most importantly, I needed to create an atmosphere where he would feel comfortable enough, confident enough, to let his true nature slip through. It had to be warm, but not so welcoming as to seem fake. Interested, but not intrusive. I had less than 30 hours to prepare the perfect trap. I spent the morning meticulously reviewing my handwritten grocery list. The dark blue ink stark against the yellow legal pad. Prime rib roast. Fresh carrots. Yukon Gold potatoes. The ingredients for a meal that would either help rebuild my family or confirm my worst fears about Martin. The drive to Whole Foods took exactly 5 minutes through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Evanston. The March air still carried a lingering winter bite, but you could see spring fighting its way back in the tiny green buds on the maple trees. Inside the store, I moved with methodical purpose through each aisle. The meat counter first, where I selected a beautiful 3-pound prime rib roast that would feed us generously. The butcher, a young man with calloused hands, wrapped it carefully in crisp white paper. Special occasion? He asked, noting the quality of the cut. Family dinner, I replied with a small smile. My daughter is bringing her fiancé. Fresh vegetables were next. Carrots with their feathery green tops still attached. A sure sign of recent harvest. Baby potatoes that would roast to a perfect golden brown alongside the beef. Brussels sprouts that I'd prepare with bacon. A dish I knew Claire had adored since she was a little girl. The wine section required more careful consideration. I needed something welcoming but not presumptuous. A modest Cabernet from Napa Valley caught my eye. Good enough to show I'd made an effort, but not so expensive as to seem like I was trying too hard to impress him. Back home, I surveyed my domain with a fresh, critical eye. The house needed attention if I wanted to make the right impression. Not for Martin's sake, but for Claire's. This was her home, too, the place where she'd grown up, and it needed to reflect the warmth and love she remembered. I started in the living room, carefully dusting each framed family photograph. David and Claire at her college graduation, both of them beaming. The three of us on a long-ago vacation in Michigan. Claire, a lanky 12-year-old with a gap-toothed grin. My own parents' wedding portrait from 1955. Their faces so serious but filled with hope. The dining room required David's good china. The Lenox pattern we had received as a wedding gift 37 years ago. Each plate emerged from the cabinet, wrapped in protective tissue paper, pristine white with a delicate gold trim. I set 3 places with an engineer's attention to detail. measuring the distance between the fork and the knife with mathematical precision. The roast went into the oven at 3:30, generously seasoned with fresh rosemary and garlic. 3 hours at a low temperature would yield the perfect medium rare that Claire preferred. Soon, the kitchen filled with savory aromas that transported me back to countless Sunday dinners when David was alive, when our table was always reliably set for 3. While the meat cooked, I prepared the vegetables. The carrots were peeled and cut into uniform pieces. The potatoes were halved and tossed with olive oil and coarse sea salt. The Brussels sprouts were cleaned and trimmed, ready for their final sauté with crispy bacon bits. The mashed potatoes would be the last thing I made, whipped with generous amounts of butter and cream, exactly the way David used to make them. Claire had always insisted they were better than any restaurants, a compliment that had made her father beam with pride. By 5 o'clock, everything was progressing perfectly. The roast's internal temperature was climbing steadily toward the target. The vegetables waited in their respective prep bowls. The wine was breathing on the counter beside 3 sparkling glasses. I went upstairs and changed into a fresh shirt, a navy blue cotton one that David had always said brought out the color of my eyes. In the bathroom mirror, I practiced expressions of welcome, trying to find the delicate balance between genuine warmth and forced, over-the-top enthusiasm. The house felt ready. Candles flickered on the dining room table. The living room looked inviting without being overly formal. The kitchen smelled like home. At 5:50, I checked the wall clock one final time. 10 minutes until they arrived. 10 minutes to prepare myself for whatever Martin would bring to my table tonight. Just then, outside, a car door slammed. They were early. I opened the front door, just as Claire was reaching for the doorbell, her finger hovering inches from the button. Behind her, Martin smoothed the front of his designer jacket with one hand while clutching a small, sleek phone with the other. "Perfect timing," I said, stepping aside to welcome them in. "You're right on schedule." Claire embraced me with a genuine warmth that finally dissolved the last of the lingering tension from our argument. "Mom, something smells incredible in here. Is that your famous pot roast?" "Prime rib tonight," I corrected, taking their coats to hang in the front closet. "I thought we should celebrate properly." "Oh my." Martin's voice had a theatrical quality that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Look at this adorable little house. So old-fashioned. But I suppose it has a certain character. Asterisk. Little house. Asterisk. The 4-bedroom colonial that David and I had saved for 3 years to buy was hardly little. But I managed to force a smile. "We have even more incredible news." Claire's excitement bubbled over as we moved from the entryway toward the living room. "We've set the date. April 15th. It's just 4 weeks away." "April 15th? I tried to keep the shock from my voice. "That's quite soon. When you know, you know," Martin said, flashing his engagement ring prominently as he gestured around the room. "No point in waiting around, right?" "Congratulations," I managed to say. "That's wonderful news indeed." We settled into the living room, where Martin immediately began to catalog the furniture with his calculating gaze. His eyes lingered on David's antique secretary desk, the Persian rug we'd bought for our 10th anniversary, and the grandfather clock that had belonged to my father. "This furniture is so vintage," he observed. "I bet some of these pieces are worth a pretty penny at auction." Claire laughed nervously. "Martin's got an eye for antiques. He's always watching those appraisal shows on TV." "How interesting," I replied, though interesting wasn't quite the word I would have chosen. Dinner service provided a welcome distraction. I carved the prime rib with ceremonial precision, the meat falling into perfect, rosy pink slices. The vegetables glistened with butter and herbs, and the wine poured like liquid ruby into our crystal glasses. "This looks lovely, Mom," Claire said, settling into her chair. "Just like Dad used to make." "Well, Not times exactly times like your dad used to make, Martin corrected, sawing at a small piece of beef. He probably had better knives. This is a little tough to cut. I watched him chew thoughtfully, his expression suggesting he was finding the meal profoundly wanting. He continued after swallowing. A bit dry, isn't it? Claire always talks about what a great cook you are, but I find that restaurant quality is just so much more consistent. Perhaps I overcooked it slightly, I replied evenly, my hand tightening on my fork. I'll adjust the timing for next time. Oh, there'll be a next time? His laugh tinkled like breaking glass. How sweet. Though, honestly, Claire and I will probably be too busy with married life to visit all that much. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Martin, we'll still have Sunday dinners here sometimes. Maybe, he said, his attention already wandering to the array of family photographs on the sideboard. That's your late husband in all these pictures, right? Such a shame he won't get to see the wedding. Really unfortunate timing on his part. The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire's fork clattered against her plate. Martin, that's not appropriate, she said quietly. What? I'm just saying it's sad timing. If he'd just hung on for a few more years, he could have met me. Martin's voice carried not a trace of awareness that he had said anything monstrously wrong. This house must feel so empty without him. All these memories everywhere. It's like living in a museum. I gripped my wine glass tighter, feeling the delicate crystal stem flex slightly under the pressure. The memories are precious, I said, my voice dangerously calm. They make the house feel full, not empty, if you say so. He poked at his Brussels sprouts with obvious distaste. These vegetables are a bit overcooked too. And what is this green stuff? They look like tiny cabbages. They're Brussels sprouts, Martin, Claire explained patiently. You said you liked them when we had them at that bistro downtown. Those were different. These taste like sulfur. The rest of the meal limped along in a similar fashion. Dessert was vanilla ice cream with fresh berries, which Martin declared to be of store-bought quality. He critiqued the coffee as being too weak, the lighting in the dining room as too dim, and even the classical music playing softly in the background as depressing funeral music. By 8:30, I was mentally and emotionally exhausted from the sheer effort of maintaining my composure. Every single comment felt like a calculated test, as if he were deliberately pushing my boundaries to see how much I would tolerate. Well, Claire said finally, glancing at her watch, we should probably head out. I have an early day tomorrow. Yes, Martin agreed, standing and smoothing his dress shirt again. This has been educational. I walked them to the front door, helping Claire with her coat, while Martin checked his reflection in the hallway mirror. Thank you for the lovely dinner, Mom, Claire said, embracing me again. Everything was delicious, despite what? She glanced at Martin with a flicker of frustration. Drive safely, I replied. Good night, both of you. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone with the wreckage of what should have been a pleasant family dinner. I stood in the entryway for several minutes, after their car disappeared down the street, my mind replaying every calculated insult Martin had delivered with the precision of a surgeon. The man had turned a simple family meal into an endurance test. Moving back to the dining room, I began clearing the table mechanically. Claire's plate was nearly empty. She'd managed to enjoy the meal, despite her fiancé's constant criticisms. Martin's portion remained largely untouched, the slices of prime rib cooling in a pool of congealed juices. As I reached for his chair to push it back under the table, something small and black caught my eye, wedged between the seat cushion and the armrest. His phone. I picked it up carefully, my only intention being to set it on the kitchen counter until I could call them. The screen was dark, but as my thumb accidentally brushed across it, it blazed to life, illuminated by an incoming text message. The sender's name stopped my heart cold. Asterisk. Brenda asterisk. The message preview was clearly visible on the lock screen. Asterisk. Missing you tonight. Handsome. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Asterisk. Before I could fully process this, another message appeared from the same contact. Asterisk. Hope your work dinner isn't too boring. Asterisk. Asterisk work dinner. Asterisk. He had told this Brenda person that he was at a work dinner, not a family dinner with his fiancée and his future mother-in-law. The little heart emoji next to her name suggested a relationship that was far from professional. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down on the dining room table. Everything I had suspected about Martin was true, but this was so much worse than simple gold digging. He was actively deceiving multiple people, living a series of parallel lives that he somehow managed to keep from intersecting. Outside, I heard the distinctive sound of Claire's car returning up the driveway. They'd realized the phone was missing. Quickly, I moved the phone to the kitchen counter, trying to arrange my expression into something approaching normal. The front door opened before I could fully compose myself. "Mom, sorry to bother you again," Claire called out, slightly breathless. "Martin forgot his phone somewhere." "Oh, here it is," I replied, retrieving it from the counter with a steady hand. "I just found it and was about to call you." "Thank you so much," Martin said, hurrying toward me with an obvious, almost frantic anxiety. I'm always forgetting that silly thing. But his eyes were sharp and calculating, searching my face for any sign that I might have seen something I shouldn't have. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, offering him the phone. "No problem at all," I said. "Technology, right? We're all slaves to these little devices." "Right," he laughed. But the sound was forced and brittle. "Well, thanks again. Dinner was interesting." They left again, and this time I watched through the living room window until their taillights had completely disappeared around the corner. Only then did I allow myself to sink into my leather armchair, the weight of my discovery settling over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Brenda with a heart emoji. A Brenda who missed him, who thought he was at a boring work dinner instead of meeting his future mother-in-law. The casual intimacy of the messages suggested a relationship that had been going on for some time, certainly longer than his 3-month whirlwind romance with Claire. How many others were there? How elaborate was the web of deception he had so carefully constructed around my naive, trusting daughter? Claire needed to know the truth, but I knew she would never believe me based on one glimpsed text message. She was too deeply in love, too committed to the fantasy of their perfect romance. I needed more than a suspicion. I needed cold, hard evidence, concrete proof that even her romantic idealism couldn't dismiss or explain away. I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, surrounded by the detritus of our disastrous dinner, and began to plan my next move. If Martin Hayes thought he could manipulate his way into my family and destroy my daughter's life, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Some battles required patience, strategy, and careful, meticulous planning. As an engineer, I understood the value of thorough investigation before taking decisive action. The war for Claire's future had officially begun. My bedroom felt like a prison cell after I finally climbed the stairs at 10:30. The events of the evening played on an endless, torturous loop behind my closed eyelids. Martin's calculated insults, Claire's blind devotion, and those damning text messages that confirmed every single suspicion I had harbored. I rolled from my back to my left side, then to my right, my eyes snapping open to check the glowing red numbers on the digital clock every few minutes. 11:47 p.m. The numbers glowed accusingly in the darkness. Asterisk Brenda Times, with a heart emoji. The sheer intimacy of that simple symbol told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. No casual friend, no distant cousin would text with that level of easy familiarity. And Times work dinner times. He had lied to her about where he was tonight, painting our family dinner as a mundane work obligation. Throwing off the covers in frustration, I padded downstairs to the kitchen. Sleep was an impossibility when my mind was racing through scenarios and possibilities like a computer processing an overwhelming amount of data. I made a fresh pot of coffee despite the late hour, needing the comfort of the ritual more than the caffeine itself. The kitchen table became my new command center. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and drew a sharp line down the middle. On the left side, I wrote Times, known facts asterisk. On the right, asterisk, suspected facts asterisk. Asterisk known. A woman named Brenda sends him intimate messages. Martin lies about his whereabouts. He is manipulative and materialistic. Asterisk. Asterisk. Suspected. Brenda believes she is in an exclusive relationship with him. There may be others. The engagement to Claire is a calculated move for financial security. Asterisk. But suspicions, no matter how strong, wouldn't be enough to convince Claire. She was too deeply in love, too committed to her fantasy of their perfect romance. I needed concrete, irrefutable evidence, photographs, witnesses, documented proof that even her romantic idealism couldn't simply dismiss. At 1:30 inches the morning, I began to map out my investigation strategy. Murphy's Tavern, on North Clark Street. I'd heard Martin mention it during a dinner conversation weeks ago. It was where he worked. That would be my starting point. I could observe his work schedule, document his interactions, and, most importantly, follow him after his shifts ended. The methodical, logical part of my engineer's brain kicked into high gear, creating timelines and planning logistics. By 3 a.m., I had a preliminary plan sketched out on the legal pad. I would position myself across the street from the tavern during his shifts, using the anonymity of coffee shops and bus stops as my cover. I would invest in a small, discreet camera with a good zoom lens. I would keep detailed written logs, complete with timestamps of his comings and goings. The investigation would need to be thorough but impeccably discreet. Martin was cunning. He would certainly spot obvious surveillance, and I couldn't risk alerting him to my suspicions before I had gathered sufficient evidence. Claire's wedding was set for April 15th, exactly 4 weeks away. That gave me 1 month. 1 month to build an airtight case against him, or to finally accept that I had been tragically wrong about the man my daughter loved. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the kitchen windows, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since David's final illness, a driving force that transcended my own comfort and fear. This wasn't about my personal dislike of Martin or my fear of losing Claire. This was about protecting my daughter from a man who I was now certain would destroy her life, piece by piece. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and finally attempted to get some sleep, knowing that the next day would mark the beginning of the most important investigation of my life. The first week taught me that real detective work was far more tedious and boring than anything you see on television. Murphy's Tavern sat on a busy corner of North Clark Street, conveniently surrounded by a variety of coffee shops and retail stores that provided perfect, anonymous observation points. I quickly learned Martin's schedule. He worked Tuesday through Saturday, arriving promptly at 4 p.m. and leaving around midnight. I positioned myself in a different location each day. A bus stop bench on Tuesday, a corner cafe on Wednesday, rotating my vantage points to avoid detection. March 20th brought my first major discovery. At 12:15 a.m., just as Martin emerged from the tavern's side employee entrance, a white pickup truck pulled to the curb. The driver, a woman in her 30s wearing a mechanic's uniform, jumped out and embraced him with an unmistakable, lingering intimacy. I managed to snap 3 clear photographs before they drove off together. One of the embrace, one showing both of their faces clearly visible in the streetlight, and a crucial shot of the truck's license plate. That night, I started my official log, March 20th. Subject met by white female, approx. 30 years old. Mechanic's clothing. Public display of affection, lasting approx. 3 minutes. Departed together in white Ford F-150, license plate JMK 8847. Asterisk. By March 25th, I had established that this woman, whom I soon learned was named Brenda, through a few overheard conversations, appeared like clockwork every Tuesday and Thursday night. Their routine was dismally consistent. She would wait for him outside the tavern. They would embrace warmly, and they would leave together in her truck. But March 27th shattered my entire understanding of the situation. At 12:10 a.m., as I sat in the darkness of my parked car across the street, a different vehicle approached the tavern. This time, it was a silver Honda Civic, driven by a different woman taller, wearing clothes from a high-end retail store, completely unfamiliar. Martin emerged from the bar and greeted this new woman with the exact same intimate affection he had shown Brenda. The same duration of embrace, the same obvious romantic familiarity. They drove away together, heading toward a different part of the city. I sat stunned in my car for a full 10 minutes, my mind reeling as I processed what I had just witnessed. It wasn't just one affair. It was two, and possibly more. Over the following weeks, the grotesque pattern became crystal clear. Brenda, the mechanic, appeared on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The second woman, whom I eventually identified as Tina Smith through some careful social media research, collected him on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Mondays and Fridays, he apparently went home alone, probably to maintain the illusion of availability for my daughter Claire. My documentation grew increasingly methodical and comprehensive. I had photographs of both women, their vehicles, their license plates. I followed each of them to their respective apartments, noting down addresses and even their work locations. Brenda worked at Henderson's Auto Repair over on Milwaukee Avenue. Tina managed a sporting goods store in Lincoln Park. Both women appeared to be genuinely devoted to Martin. I observed Brenda bringing him flowers one night, and saw Tina carrying what looked like an expensive jewelry box another. Neither showed any awareness of the other's existence. Meanwhile, Martin maintained his engagement to Claire with seamless, sociopathic deception. I watched him answer her calls during his breaks at the bar, his voice dripping with affection. I saw him flipping through wedding planning magazines during slow periods. By April 10th, my evidence file contained 47 photographs, 3 weeks of detailed written observations, and complete background information on both Brenda Brown and Tina Smith. Two decent, hard-working women who were being systematically deceived by a man who viewed relationships as nothing more than financial opportunities. The wedding was now just 5 days away. Claire had spent the past month in a state of blissful preparation, excitedly discussing honeymoon plans and looking at apartments for their future married life together. On April 14th, the day before the wedding, I sat in my study and reviewed the complete file one final time. 27 days of relentless surveillance had revealed a web of deception, so elaborate and cold-blooded that it bordered on the sociopathic. Martin wasn't just cheating on Claire. He was meticulously maintaining 3 separate, parallel relationships with military precision. Tomorrow, my daughter would stand at an altar and promise her life to a man who didn't truly exist. Not if I could help it. I woke at 6 a.m. on April 14th with the stark clarity that comes only from making an irrevocable decision. Today was my last chance to save Claire from making the biggest mistake of her life. The evidence was spread across my dining room table like the pieces of a complex and heartbreaking puzzle. 47 photographs arranged in chronological order. 3 weeks of handwritten surveillance logs. My background research on Brenda Brown and Tina Smith, and a single timeline that showed the systematic deception that had consumed a full month of my life. The photographs told the story with brutal, undeniable clarity. March 20th. Martin embracing Brenda outside Murphy's Tavern. March 27th. Martin kissing Tina beside her Honda Civic. April 3rd. Brenda and Martin sharing an intimate dinner at an Italian restaurant. April 8th. Tina and Martin browsing engagement rings at a jewelry store downtown. Asterisk engagement rings. Asterisk. He was planning to marry at least 3 people. I created a presentation folder, organizing the evidence for maximum, devastating impact. The timeline went on top. A single sheet that starkly illustrated how he divided his week between his 3 unsuspecting victims. Claire on Sundays and Mondays, Brenda on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tina on Wednesdays and Saturdays, with Fridays reserved for work or other family obligations. Next came the photographs, each with a detailed caption noting the date, time, location, and context. Finally, I included the written observations, which documented behavioral patterns that proved this was premeditated deception, not just impulsive infidelity. By 11 a.m., I had everything organized into a presentation that I knew would demolish Claire's romantic illusions in under 5 minutes. But simply presenting the evidence was only part of my plan. I needed Brenda and Tina to witness the truth for themselves. Firsthand, I spent 2 hours carefully crafting text messages designed to bring both women to the wedding venue during the reception. The approach required delicate psychology. The messages needed to be urgent enough to guarantee their presence, but believable enough to avoid arousing suspicion. To Brenda. Brenda. This is urgent. Martin had an accident at Evanston Park, near the wedding pavilion. He's conscious, but shaken, and is asking specifically for you. Please, come immediately. He needs you, right now. To Tina. Tina. There's an emergency involving Martin at Evanston Park by the wedding area. He fell and hurt his ankle. He keeps asking for you by name. Please hurry. He's really upset and needs your support. Both messages exploited their genuine care for Martin, while positioning them to arrive at the wedding reception at the exact same time. The truth would then reveal itself without requiring a single word of explanation from me. The timing had to be perfect. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., with the reception starting around 4 p.m. I would wait until 5 p.m., when the guests were settled and celebratory, then send both messages simultaneously. 20 minutes later, Brenda and Tina would arrive, expecting to comfort an injured Martin, only to discover him celebrating his marriage to another woman. That evening, I sat in my study with the evidence folder resting beside me on the desk and my phone displaying both prepared messages. Tomorrow, at this time, Claire's marriage would be over before it had truly begun. The immense weight of what I was about to do settled heavily on my shoulders. In less than 24 hours, I would be forced to destroy my own daughter's happiness in order to save her future. She would hate me for it, possibly for the rest of her life, but better her anger at me now than her complete and utter devastation after years of being married to a sociopath. I reviewed my plan one final time, meticulously checking for any flaws or oversights. The evidence was irrefutable. The confrontation strategy was sound. The timing would maximize the impact, while minimizing Martin's ability to manipulate or lie his way out of the situation. At 10 p.m., I locked the evidence folder in my desk drawer and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would be the most difficult day of my life, but also the most necessary. Claire deserved so much better than Martin Hayes. By this time tomorrow, she would know exactly what kind of man she had almost married. And if my careful plan worked correctly, Brenda Brown and Tina Smith would finally learn the truth about the man they both thought they loved exclusively. Sleep came easier than I expected. My conscience was clear, and my purpose was resolved. The wedding ceremony had concluded flawlessly under the warm spring afternoon Sunday. Claire and Martin stood surrounded by a sea of congratulations, his white tuxedo brilliant against the lush green backdrop of Evanston Park. I sat in the front row, in the section reserved for the mother of the bride, the damning evidence folder pressed against my ribs inside my suit jacket. 50 guests moved from the ceremony area to the reception pavilion, their happy laughter echoing through the trees. Martin accepted praise with a growing, almost smug confidence, his hand gripping Claire's arm possessively, as if he were claiming territory. "Such a handsome groom," commented Claire's Aunt Eleanor. "You must be so happy to welcome him into the family, Margaret." "Indeed," I replied, my eyes fixed on Martin, as he scanned the crowd, his gaze cataloging the expensive jewelry worn by our relatives. As the reception settled into its rhythm, Martin's behavior began to shift noticeably. The demure, charming facade he had maintained during our previous encounters dissolved, replaced by something more aggressive, more entitled. "Claire's mother has such a large house," he mentioned loudly to a group of family friends. "All that space for just one person seems terribly wasteful, don't you think?" "Oh, are you two thinking of moving in together?" asked my cousin Susan innocently. "Well, young couples need room to grow, don't they?" Martin's voice carried a calculating edge that made several of the listeners exchange uncomfortable glances. All those bedrooms, just sitting empty. 20 minutes into the reception, he approached me directly. The crowd had thinned around the gift table, providing him with the privacy he clearly desired for his real agenda. "Margaret, we need to discuss something important." His voice held none of the cloying sweetness he had used during our disastrous dinner a month ago. "Claire and I have been talking about our future living arrangements." "Oh?" I set down my champagne glass, meeting his gaze steadily. "Your house. It's perfect for newlyweds. And frankly, you don't need all that space anymore." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a more aggressive, demanding tone. "We'd like you to sign it over to us." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away, even though I had been expecting something like this. "I'm sorry, Martin, but that's my home. I won't be giving it up." His face flushed with irritation. "Won't be giving it up? You're old and alone, Margaret. What could you possibly need all that space for? It's selfish to hoard resources when a young family needs them." "My answer is no, Martin. Maybe this will change your mind." The slap cracked across my cheek with the sharp report of a gunshot. The sound carried across the reception area, causing dozens of heads to snap in our direction. My face stung, a hot, radiating pain. But I remained perfectly still, letting the shocking moment register with every single witness present. Claire materialized beside us within seconds, her face a mask of confusion and embarrassment. "What's happening here? Martin? Why did you just hit my mother? She's being completely unreasonable about the house situation," he snapped, apparently unaware that assaulting an elderly woman at his own wedding reception might not reflect well on his character. I reached calmly into my jacket and withdrew my phone. I maintained steady eye contact with Martin while Claire stared between us, completely bewildered. "I think it's time everyone learned the truth about who you really are," I said quietly, my thumb moving with deliberate slowness across the phone's screen. "What are you doing?" Martin's voice carried the first note of genuine concern I had ever heard from him. "Making a couple of calls," I replied, sending the first prepared message to Brenda Brown. "You'll see." The second message went to Tina Smith. Both texts were identical in their feigned urgency, both designed to bring Martin's secret lives crashing into his public one. "They should be here in about 20 minutes, I said, pocketing the phone with a small, satisfied smile. 20 minutes later, the sound of gravel crunching under tires announced the first arrival. A white pickup truck skidded into the park's small parking area, its driver clearly in a state of panic. Brenda Brown jumped from the cab and rushed toward the pavilion, her mechanic's uniform wrinkled from her hasty departure. A moment behind her, a silver Honda Civic appeared, disgorging Tina Smith with equal urgency. The two women spotted each other immediately, their expressions of shared confusion evident as they approached the reception area, where 50 wedding guests now watched with rapt and growing curiosity. "Martin," Brenda called out breathlessly, "I got your message about an accident." Are you hurt? Why are you wearing a tuxedo? Tina stopped short when she saw Brenda, her face creasing with bewilderment. Wait, who is this? How does she know Martin? The reception fell completely silent. Every single guest turned to watch as two strange women interrupted the celebration. Both of them obviously familiar with the groom in ways that suggested relationships far beyond casual friendship. Martin stood frozen in his white tuxedo, his face cycling through a rapid succession of shock, panic, and desperate calculation. Claire looked between the three figures as if she were watching a play performed in a foreign language she didn't understand. This isn't... You weren't supposed to, Martin stammered, his usual smooth composure completely shattered. How do these women know my husband? Claire asked quietly, the word husband hanging in the air like a bitter accusation. I stepped forward, withdrawing the evidence folder from my jacket with ceremonial precision. Ladies, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Margaret Duncan, mother of the bride. And I believe I can answer that question. Brenda and Tina stared at me, with matching expressions of confusion and growing dread. Because, I announced, my voice ringing with clarity, I've spent the last month documenting this man's lies to all three of you. 3 of us? Tina's voice cracked slightly. I opened the folder and removed the chronologically arranged photographs, holding them up high so that everyone could see. March 20th. Martin with Brenda, outside Murphy's Tavern. I displayed the first image, showing their intimate embrace in perfect, damning clarity. March 27th. Martin with Tina entering her apartment building. Brenda snatched the photograph of Martin kissing Tina, studying it with the intensity of a woman watching her entire world collapse. April 3rd. Martin and Brenda at Jeppy's restaurant. The romantic dinner photo was passed between their shaking hands. April 8th. Martin and Tina shopping for engagement rings at Tiffany & Co. Engagement rings? Claire's voice was barely an audible whisper. 27 days of surveillance. I continued relentlessly. 47 photographs documenting a systematic deception. He has been conducting 3 simultaneous relationships, all while telling each of you that you were the only one. Tina stared at the photograph of Brenda kissing Martin, then at Brenda herself. You've been dating him too? Dating him? I thought we were exclusive. Brenda's voice rose to a near shout. He told me he loved me. The overwhelming weight of the revelation seemed to hit Martin like a physical blow. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious before anyone could even move to catch him. Wedding guests pressed closer, everyone talking at once. The carefully orchestrated celebration dissolving into a chaotic mess of scandal and disbelief. Claire knelt beside the photographs that had scattered on the ground, picking them up one by one, studying each image with the methodical attention of someone learning that their entire reality had been constructed from a foundation of lies. These are real, she whispered to herself. All of this is real. I'm so sorry, honey. I truly wanted to be wrong about him. Brenda and Tina stood together in stunned silence. 2 strangers united by their shared victimization. Both had been manipulated with identical tactics, identical promises, and identical lies. I can't believe we were both played like this, Brenda said finally, her voice hollow. A year of my life, Tina replied, shaking her head in disbelief. A year of believing I'd finally found someone special. They both looked down at Martin's unconscious form, with expressions of pure disgust and betrayal, then turned and walked away from the destroyed reception without another word. As their vehicles departed, Claire continued to study the photographs, her wedding dreams crumbling to dust with each new, documented deception. What am I supposed to do now? She asked the empty spring air. Martin regained consciousness to find the reception area nearly empty. Most of the guests had departed in a flurry of hushed whispers, after witnessing the spectacular collapse of what should have been a joyous celebration. He sat up slowly, his pristine white tuxedo now rumpled and stained with grass. "Claire?" His voice carried a note of desperate hope. "Claire, where is everyone?" She stood 10 feet away from him, still holding the stack of photographs that had destroyed their marriage before it had truly begun. Brenda and Tina were gone. Their tire tracks in the gravel were the only evidence that they had ever existed in his carefully compartmentalized world. "They left," Claire said simply, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Everyone left." Martin struggled to his feet, smoothing his jacket with shaking hands. "Claire, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. I can explain everything." "Explain what exactly?" Her voice held a chilling flatness I had never heard from her before. "Explain how you were engaged to me while you were sleeping with 2 other women. Explain how you lied, every single day, to all 3 of us for months. Those relationships didn't mean anything." He moved toward her, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "You're the one I chose to marry. You're the one I love." Claire took a deliberate step backward, maintaining the distance between them. "Love? You don't even understand what that word means. Please, just give me another chance. I'll prove my love to you. I'll end things with them completely, right now. End things with them." Claire's laugh was a harsh, humorless sound. "They already ended things with you, Martin. Did you see their faces when they realized they'd been sharing you with someone else?" As his tactics of manipulation failed one by one, Martin's desperation finally curdled into anger. "Fine. You want to throw away our future over some stupid photographs? You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "No," Claire said quietly, her voice firm. "The biggest mistake of my life was believing you in the first place." She turned and addressed the few remaining guests with a quiet, heartbreaking dignity. "The wedding is canceled. Thank you all for coming, but there won't be a reception." Martin made one final pathetic attempt. "Claire, think about what you're giving up. We had plans, a future together. Don't let your paranoid mother destroy our happiness." "My mother," Claire said, her voice growing stronger and clearer with each word, "saved me from a lifetime of lies. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me with 2 other women while we were planning our wedding." He stared at her for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that his carefully constructed world of deception had completely and irrevocably collapsed. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the parking area, his polished dress shoes clicking against the pavement with a stiff, mechanical rhythm. When his car had disappeared around the corner, Claire and I stood alone among the abandoned wedding decorations. White ribbons fluttered from empty chairs like tiny ghosts, and the untouched wedding cake sat on a nearby table like a monument to shattered dreams. "Mom, I owe you an enormous apology." Claire's voice shook slightly. "You were right about him from the very beginning. I'm just sorry it had to happen this way, honey. I genuinely wanted to be wrong about him. Thank you." She picked up one of the photographs, the one showing Martin with Tina. "Thank you for saving me from the biggest mistake of my life. That's what mothers do. Protect their children from harm, even when it's painful." Claire studied the image for another moment, then set it down gently among the scattered evidence. "I promise to listen to your concerns in the future. Really listen. Not just dismiss them because I think I know better. And I promise to trust your judgment more than I have." I placed my hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture of comfort and solidarity. We both learned something important today. Together, we walked away from the destroyed reception, leaving behind the white ribbons and the abandoned cake, the scattered photographs and the broken promises. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees as we headed toward the parking lot, a mother and daughter united by a painful truth rather than divided by a beautiful deception. Claire would recover from this betrayal. She was young, intelligent, and now, infinitely wiser about the profound difference between genuine love and skilled manipulation. Someday, she would find someone worthy of her incredible devotion, and I would be there to welcome them, properly this time, into our small but resilient family. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.